Okay, lads, let's get to some work. And lassies. All right, today's topic is going to be market failures. All right, we've looked at a bunch of market structures. Now we're going to focus on market failures, which is when the market fails to produce the right amount of the product. When this happens, there are two specific ways we're going to look at where resources may be overallocated or underallocated. What is a market failure? It's when the price mechanism leads to an inefficient allocation of resources and a deadweight loss of economic welfare. The three we're going to focus on: negative externalities, positive externalities, and public goods. All right. Let's look at a demand side failure where it's impossible to charge consumers what they are willing to pay for the product. Therefore, some people can enjoy benefits without actually paying for the product. Then we have a supply side failure, which occurs when a firm does not pay the full cost of producing its output. The external cost of producing the goods are not reflected in the supply. Therefore, it is cheaper for the firm to produce the good, and they will produce more of the good. Okay, so let's look at efficiently functioning markets. Okay, so we got the demand curve must reflect. So we've talked about this. Supply curve must reflect all the cost of production. The demand curve is reflecting the consumer's full willingness to pay. So now we've talked about consumer surplus before. All right, we're going to run through this rather quickly. Pull up the graph. There's your consumer surplus. Then we have producer surplus. Okay, and we'll pull that up. All of this is an output of Q1, right? And then we have, whoa, let's go back one. Okay, so there we have consumer surplus and producer surplus as long as we're at Q1. Okay, that is an efficient market, all right? Now let's look at efficiency losses. So we'll put up a graph. Okay, again, we're looking at Q1 being the efficient amount to produce. What happens when we produce less than that? When we underallocate our resources, okay, we end up with this deadweight loss, which is an efficiency loss from underproduction. So we're inefficient because we're not producing enough of the good. And that's the difference between Q2. We're actually producing Q2 when we should be producing Q1, so that shaded triangle is what we're losing by not producing enough. Okay, what about when we produce too much? Okay, again, the efficient amount is Q1. What happens if we go to Q3? Okay, at Q3, we have this amount, which is from overproduction. Right, so now that we've covered what the inefficiencies for over and underproduction look like, let's talk about externalities. Okay, an externality is when there's a cost or a benefit accruing to a third party external to the transaction. So I always like to say it's neither someone who's not the buyer or the producer of the good is either paying for it or benefiting from it. If they're paying for it, it's considered a negative externality. Okay, and if they're paying for it, then the firm's not paying all of the cost. So a negative externality, too much is produced, and it's a supply side market failure. So a quick example here would be this bus. You're waiting for a bus, you're waiting to be picked up by your parents at Northern Boulevard, and this bus drives by and you have to breathe in all that smoke. Okay, so you're not the owner of the bus company, and you're not the consumer of the bus service. Therefore, you are the third party. Other examples are the ones on this chart. Okay, noise pollution from neighbors, air pollution from smokers, spillover costs from rising levels of obesity. Okay, let's graph negative externality. So we know with the negative externality that we're producing too much at too low of a price. So PE is too low and QE is too high, too much. Okay, so we're going to label these graphs now. So now the demand curve is also known as the marginal social benefit. This is the benefit to society of this good. Now the marginal private cost, which is the MPC, should be MSC. We want marginal social cost. So to be efficient, you need marginal social benefit to equal marginal social cost. In this case, we don't have that. We have the benefit equaling the private cost. All right. So what we need to do is we need to cut back, get back to Q1. Okay. And remember that area we talked about before. This is the deadweight loss from the overproduction. Right. This is inefficiency to society. So what we need to do is to get rid of that. And the best way to get rid of that is to tax the firm, where we'll now shift the supply curve to the left. That's our marginal social cost. And we're now at Q1 NP, and we've eliminated the negative externality. We've now made the firm pay the full cost of producing the good. You know, another thing to look at would be pollution is very good, especially when you talk about like dry cleaners. If the dry cleaner doesn't have to pay the full cost of the dry cleaning because he's polluting the air and doesn't have to pay for it, he can charge a lower price, and then more people are willing to buy it. The government can tax them, which is considered another cost, and that would cause the supply curve to shift to the left. Okay, in this case, marginal social cost equal to marginal social benefit. Now, the next type of externality, again, we talk about the benefit. Positive externality, too little is produced, and it's a demand side failure. Example of that would be a vaccination. The flu vaccination is one I've talked about in the past, right? If everybody gets the flu vaccination in school and I don't, I benefit from it. I haven't purchased it and I'm not the producer of it, but I would benefit from it because everyone else has gotten it, which means there wouldn't be enough available. Same thing with the COVID-19 virus, right? The vaccine for it, if 75% of the country gets it, it should be able to protect the rest of the country. Okay, so maybe not everyone's going to want to go and get that. All right, and then we have a couple examples of positive externality: libraries, museums, nutritional meals, early education. Right here we have the prices equilibrium, the quantities equilibrium, but we're not producing enough. We want to be where Q1 is. Okay. And if you remember the inefficiency graph, right, for producing too little, it's that triangle there. We want to include that because this is a positive good. So how do we get there is the question. And the answer is you subsidize the consumer. So you give the consumer more money, which I didn't mention earlier is the graph. In this case, marginal private benefit is too low. We want to get to marginal social benefit. We subsidize, consumers have more money, and we're at marginal social benefit. Quick example of this is solar panels, right? The government will actually subsidize, give tax breaks to consumers who install solar panels in their house, because this will be a benefit to everyone because we won't be dependent on foreign oil. All right, so let's just go through a quick review. Externalities, right? Third party, benefit or cost. Positive externality, too little is produced. It's a demand side market failure. All right. And then we have the negative externality, too much is produced, and it's a supply side market failure. How do we can correct negative externalities through government intervention. Okay. They can take direct control over the product. They can make specific taxes. Okay. To correct the positive externality, they can subsidize, right? Or they can make government provisions. One of the things they're talking about with the vaccine for the virus is maybe make a government rule or law saying that you have to have proof of vaccination before you can fly to different areas of the country or different areas of the world for that matter. Okay, so what's the government's role in the economy? The government can have a role in correcting the externality. The problem is they must be able to identify the existence and the cause. All right, and just to give you an example, here's a method for dealing with externalities, right? We could do it through liability and lawsuits, tax on producers, direct control, private bargaining, market for externality rights. So if the U.S. pollutes less, but they get a certain amount of pollution rights, and they don't use them, they could sell them to other countries, which would be an incentive for countries not to use all their pollution rights so that they can sell them to other countries. For a positive externality, again, private bargaining, subsidize the consumer or the producer. The College Board likes to focus on subsidizing the consumer, not the producer. All right, so those are your negative externality, positive externality, and I would say the key to it is remembering that a negative externality, too much is produced at too low of a price, and therefore you want to tax. And a positive externality is not enough, and the price is too high. Okay, so you subsidize the consumer to fix that. That's my phone. Let me get it. Enjoy your afternoon, evening, or morning.